I'm Pamela Haynes from Gifts and Leadings, and I'm so pleased to have everybody here for the second in our series of meetings for worship with attention to ministry with Berta Britz. And I'm not sure there's anything more that I need to say. Berta will speak, and then we'll settle into a meeting for worship time where everybody will be welcome to speak out of the silence.
If I can just mention that this portion of the event will be recorded, but not the meeting for worship portion.
Thank you, Jonathan. So, Berta, you get to speak as you were led.
It's such a joy to be here with friends from Central Philadelphia and others who joined. I want to welcome everybody, and as soon as I say that, I think about what it means to be a host and claim a space that you're responsible for, or that you can open the door to some and not to others. I'm very grateful that we're gathered. And I want to welcome all ancestors, all voices, everybody who can use Zoom, and shapes and sizes and colors and genders, orientations, sexual orientations, beliefs, all of our origin stories. I want to welcome all of us who can possibly be here on Zoom with me. I feel you holding me in your presence. And, I have this ministry that has been named that I have named Hearing Voices, Healing, Wholeness, and Justice. And it comes from my particular experience and my journey and awareness that my experience is my own, and it's within a context of many others. I went from feeling there was no place on earth for me to feeling that I'm part of every place on earth, and that as long as I'm paying attention and listening for messages from Spirit, from all of you, that I'm not involved for my small place in this flow. I'm fully in this place, in this flow, and I'm surrounded by life and spirit in you, in all people and all of creation. Participation is something that I feel a call to as an essential for me being alive, that I have to be oriented to be present and stay open to learning and being shaped. I've been shaped by so many forces. I have so much to be grateful for. And many of those forces also caused me great suffering. And when one is afraid or when one is in pain, to recoil and withdraw or run or fight feels natural. And it's also something that I learned that's part of conditioning. So I thought about, how do I share this with all of you? And I have this capacity to be circles within circles within circles, and to feel that I must push up against and question every structure. So I have this structure of time on Zoom. How can I use it? And the image of a river came to me, and stones in the river, because I've identified various wake up spots, landings where I found more liberation, more sense of connection. And so I decided, well, let me think of this Zoom as a river. I've always been drawn to stones. One set of friends gave me 2 river rocks to put my feet on because I couldn't touch the ground from the chairs in their living room. But when I was a teenager, I wrote, I was assigned to write a prayer, and I really wasn't ready to write a prayer in the sense that my Jewish heritage expected. So I wrote a poem giving thanks for rocks. I am so grateful for every rock. And I think about the violence all around us, and the violence that's been all around me for as long as I can remember and before I can remember. I was raised quite Jewish, and I have ancestors who ran from the pogroms in Russia and landed in England and Wales, and others who, some of them who started in Germany and Poland, and I'd only only my immediate maternal side made it to the United States. And I've always been aware of chaos and terror that was hard to name. And as I learned how to read there, late in life, for me, it was late in life. I was almost 8. I was still confused. I realize now that the histories are written by the conquerors. And I was very confused because I saw myself in all sides, in all of those fighting each other and fighting to survive. My family gave me a great deal, and it was mixed. As I've discovered, life is mixed. Feeling different. There were not a lot of Jewish people where we lived. And there was this sense that Jews have to, stand together against oppressors, against the pogroms, against the Nazis, the pharaohs. Every Sunday, I took a quarter in Karen Ami for planting olive trees in Israel. And I didn't understand. Those that tried to protect me made it hard for me to breathe. They used terror to protect me. They were afraid for me. They were afraid of me. There's a line from a poem by Adrienne Rich that says, I must use the language of the oppressors to speak to you. I think I'm forgetting, I'm not remembering it exactly, but it's a line that really reverberates with me as I think about my own language that was unique to me, that I had to lose. And then I think about other people who've been uprooted, all of the people who were caught and enslaved, whose cultures and language were stamped on, and the indigenous people whose languages were attacked and whose cultures and beings and bodies were violated. And I recognize that I'm part of life. I've been given a gift of life, and I'm part of a long, long line of violence and dominance. It's in me. I've been shaped by it. It's all around us. I think I wasn't intending to start out exactly this way, but the message in our last meeting for worship about the gun violence, as well as the message about the charter on the wall of the meeting house in Ramallah Friends meeting, about compassion. Those two parts of meeting this morning really shifted my rocks, the rocks in my river. I've always felt that I'm part of the river. And when I read that you never step in the river in the same place twice, that goes back to Heraclitus. And I read that at 13 and I thought, oh yeah. The river runs through me. It runs around me, and it's through all of you. I'm only trying to listen for the messages that will sustain us. Not me only, because I fully expect to be rejoined with the earth pretty soon, hoping that it generates more sustainable seeds. So I already shifted from a vision I had of this talking with you, and that includes trying to tame some of my messages into stepping stones that other people might feel like they can land on and breathe more. Breathing, something that we creatures share. And it's hard for me to speak to people without sometimes tuning in visually to you. And I think about if we take a breath and we let it out, that's the natural flow of internal and external. Our inner lives and our outer lives have been connected for as long as we've been alive. And that was my reality. It was very hard for me to understand if something I heard or something I saw or sensed was something that other people also saw or heard or sensed, and did it mean the same thing? As a very young child, I just didn't know. I didn't feel that extreme clarity between inner and outer. I did see myself in every character, in every story I was told or heard or later read. That can make for a lot of cacophony. It really depends on the climate around us. The people closest to me were afraid for me and of me from the time of my birth. I was named for my grandmother Bertha, and my mother took out the H. And had trouble seeing me as other than a monster or an animal that needed tending, that was too much for her. She had her mother as the example that she knew she couldn't follow. And she had lost her while she was pregnant with me. My grandmother Bertha died in March, and I was born on Halloween. And my mother wanted to want me. She shared stories with me later about when I was a baby and how it had been so important to her to bathe me herself. And she told me stories, the story of having tried to drown me before she stopped herself. I never knew why I was afraid of water. But I was gifted with others who could teach me and shape me and share more languages with me of touch and care and being social, how to hold a fork, how to sing. They taught me peace I ask of thee, O river. Peace, peace, peace. When I learn to live serenely, cares will cease. From the hills I gather courage, visions of the days to be, strength to lead and faith to follow. All are given unto me. Peace I ask of thee, O river. Peace, peace, peace. Now, when I was a kid, I thought they were saying peace. Peas, P-E-A-S. I hated peas. I still do. Green peas are one of the few vegetables I don't eat. But I was carried by spirit in those people around me and the ground we were on. It was Kickapoo ground. I loved that ground. Is that I imagine that could be seen as my appropriating ground that others tended and respected and honored. I was nourished by it. So I think about now, looking at the time, because when you're in a river, it's hard to time the current between one stone and another. But I want to just land on a stone to clarify about hearing voices, what that means when I use that phrase. Voices are messages. Hearing, seeing, sensing what those around us don't. We friends listen in silence for spirit. I've found spirit in the wind, in the trees, in animals, in all of the people around me. I can, but I don't have time right now to name every relationship that taught me and nurtured me and shaped me and brought me closer to healing. Not any one of them was ideal from some kind of, I don't know who makes up ideals. They were all enough to eventually allow me to embody that I am enough with all my faults and failings and cracks and ugliness, the violence I carry. I am enough. I wanted to prepare to be able to give this message in a way that might connect with folks. And I'm not following that map, but I'm navigating from what I experience as real, which is being together, practicing presence, breathing in and out, sharing our inner knowledge and our outer knowledge, being shaped and teachable. I had this one voice when I was really, really struggling and considered that I was disabled and not human. I gotta go back a minute. I understood that I wasn't human from the date of my birth by the ways that I was, how I was treated and taught. The only sense I could make of my experience was that I was alien. And this is not to say it was any one person's responsibility. When we create refugees, when we alienate and exile parts of ourselves, parts of humanity, it leaves the baby Berta to understand that she's other, not human. And at one point I found that a place I thought I belonged was after I dropped out of high school, being in a mental hospital. And that seemed like it was the only place that would keep me breathing. So it was one of those landing places. And it was a really dangerous, dangerous one for me. It allowed me to separate further and further from being enough, from feeling connected and human. So during those times, not just in the hospital, but for decades afterward, I had a voice named Hector, who was the most terrifying, abusive, oppressive, cruel voice one could imagine. And he used to demand of other voices that they follow his commands, and also, of course, me, that I must follow his commands. Now, this could get really scary, both for me and those around me, and it did. So I have to say that healing can take time. And I get really impatient because sometimes the stuff that's supposed to help injures so much more than the original problem. I was not the problem. I was a product of many, many kinds of violence way beyond me. And I question, I'm 70 plus now. I've lived longer than people live who have the diagnoses and the treatments that I've had. So I feel such a need to generate spaces for voices to be heard and seen and felt as worthy of honor, as part of the whole that we turn towards. I could never totally screen out and turn away from a cacophony of violence. And I didn't have accompaniment that was less afraid. So building spaces where people trust enough to find courage enough to pay attention and listen to the connections that are there among us, through us, around us, from our source, which I call spirit. last weekend meeting for worship, I quoted Wendell Berry's lines about there are no unsacred spaces, places, only sacred places and desecrated. And that really resonated with me as I thought of it in terms of beings. There are no unsacred beings, only sacred and desecrated. How do we heal the tears of historic, generational violence? The honoring of hierarchy that names some of us less than. The Hearing Voices movement taught me about changing my relationship with the voices that I heard that others didn't. So Hector was this fiercest of the fierce of my voices. And he said that I had to become more humble. And back in the day, when he said that, that meant set myself on fire. That meant do damage to myself. But when I could slow things down enough so that I wasn't paying attention to every single voice and every single message and sensation, I could ask him, why? What does that mean? I had to learn to have the courage to ask questions. When I was a child, I couldn't ask. But because of all the stones, all the hearts and hands and messages that I've received in this river, I started being able to have a different relationship with Hector because I found out a different way of understanding. To be humble doesn't necessarily mean that I must be subordinate and surrender to his power and do whatever he says. So that's where friends also come in. Quakers who speak about compassion and being teachable, how we can all change our relationship with what we think of as reality, as what is, by coming together wound to wound, compassion not for these others, these less thans, but experiencing the flow and the mutual pain and the mutual joy that can flow. So Hector doesn't violate me. I think my time is about up. I've touched on messages that can carry both injury and healing. And a wholeness that transcends specific languages or words. or meanings. And the justice that's needed for us to be brave enough to listen and find the space of connection. I wrote down a quote that I'm going to actually read from Howard Thurman. I really liked Howard Thurman immediately when I heard that his first or early spiritual experience he had was with a tree, because that resonated with mine with trees and dogs and other animals. Howard Thurman said that in order to act justly in an unjust world, we each must find the sound of the genuine inside ourselves and then connect with the sound of the genuine in others, especially in those most harmed. Here's how he described it. Now, if I hear the sound of the genuine in me, and if you hear the sound of the genuine in you, it is possible for me to go down in me and come up in you. So that when I look at myself through your eyes, having made that pilgrimage, I see in me what you see in me. And the wall that separates and divides will disappear. And we will become one, because the sound of the genuine makes the same music. I'm gonna sing another song. Break 'em on down, break 'em on down, break 'em on down, these walls between us. Break 'em on down, break 'em on down, these walls between us. Break these walls, break these walls down, break 'em on down, break 'em on down, break 'em on down, these walls between us. Thanks for being in the river with me. I'm still orienting, turning towards, listening for the messages, and being taught and shaped by everyone I meet, all of you who I know, and all of my experiences from as far back as my birth. And I guess I'm kind of centering my experience here, which is not particularly just, but I'm going to go back to the river. Peace I ask of thee, O river. Peace, peace, peace. Václav, what's his name? I was going to use somebody else's words again, and I've forgotten how to say his name. Oh, yes. Václav Havel said, we're all part of, and I'm paraphrasing because I'm not going to look for what the exact is, but we're all part of this river. When we're part of it, we're responsible for it. What I learned is I can be responsible and accountable to Spirit for my peace. And my peace needs to and is connected with all of your pieces, with the fabric of sustainable justice that includes all voices, all cultures, all breaths. So when we breathe in and we breathe out, our inner and outer wisdom and spirit are shared. Thank you. We can move into worship and see all faces.